Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. I am so happy to have these conversations. We're going on, I don't know, Joel, what is it, 3 years, 3.5 years now? That it's crazy to watch the evolution of projects like this. And He Changed It is moving forward leaps and bounds. If you haven't heard what is happening, go to hechangedit.com. You can look at all the latest updates. And I love when we have returning guests to heCast because their lives are evolving too. And Caleb Matthews has been on before. Very excited to have him back here. When he came on before, we mostly talked about the dream interpretations and things, which is something that you are very well schooled in. But since then, you have gone on a journey, and you and I go for coffees and things all the time. You and I are just fast friends and have stayed true friends. And I appreciate you so much, Caleb. As I've gone through some of the things I've gone through with losing my dad and whatnot, you've been a steadfast friend, and I appreciate the heck out of you. Welcome back to heCast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on, Mike. This is a great privilege and honor to be with you again. Always have a great time with our conversations because I know we can just take off. We have got stuff we got prepped for, and then we've got the rocket ship that just takes off. So thank you for having me on the show.
No, it's good. Yeah, you and I can jump down any number of rabbit holes at any particular time. But that being said, I do want to talk about, there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk about. When we talked last time, you were still in the throes of your corporate life, which you had been building for a long time. And thinking about the idea of, okay, how do you take the dream interpretation and some of the other skill sets that you have that are more, aligned to who you are, and how can you make them sort of your job and your way of life where you can kind of jump into those.
Yeah.
You have moved leaps and bounds in that time, and I'm really proud of you and excited for you, because there's a lot of guys who are listening to this thing that are living those quiet lives of desperation. They are in a place where they may feel a little stuck.
Yeah.
Safe to say, is that what it was for you? Were you feeling stuck back when you were working in the corporate world?
It's a good question. I would say it's a combination of feeling stuck and capped, but also it was at the point where I felt like I wasn't living my cup to the fullest.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is it makes me think of an ancient text where it talks about one of the great kings. His name was King David. And when he reached the end of his life, there was a phrase in the text that said, when he reached the end of his life and he was full of days, then he went to his fathers and then he passed on. Mm-hmm. And I realized when I reached my 10-year mark of my career, I was like, wow, 10's a very, very important marker, that I'm not full of days here. This is not something where I just feel stuck, but also I feel like I'm not using the DNA of design that I have in my life that I've been created with, my full gift mix. If I stay here for another 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, making good money, making a job that makes me 5 to eventually 6 figures, a comfortable job, I'm not going to fulfill my purpose and see the link with my DNA of design fulfilled on the earth. And so that's why I pivoted, because my company was not willing to change, was not willing to morph. I even presented and talked about this with you as well too, to the president of the company. I was one of the top sales reps for the company. Went the trips to Vegas, did the limousines, did the Stanley Cup finals, did the baseball games and the Jays in Seattle, won all the awards and trophies, was one of the top next generation guys in the company. Yeah. And I was like, okay, like I want to be able to move and be able to morph and create and reinvent myself and not just be another number in the institutional corporate world concentration camp. And so I said, this is my offer.
Corporate world concentration camp.
I'm just going to put that out there. That might be a little bit.
You can tell you have a podcast now.
Rattle the cages. But I was like, this is the offer that I have, because I want to get out of the camp.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in the conventional.
Yeah.
I want to pursue the unconventional design of my life.
Yeah.
And so I said, this is my offer. I even had it vetted by many corporate world executives that were higher up than my president of the company. They all said, this is a great offer. Yeah. Surely someone's going to take it. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to work remotely 6 months in Mexico and work remotely from there and support the company, and 6 months on the ground and be kind of like a hybrid salesperson.
Yep.
But I believe that I'd reached the right to be able to ask my company, because I'd given 10 years of my life and been one of their most faithful and loyal workers. And unfortunately, he said, and my I still remember the conversation, sitting in the Texas airport back from one of my trips, seeing one of my friends in Houston, Texas, sitting there on the phone and hearing his voice saying, I'm not willing to try this offer out that you have. And I wasn't even willing to try it out, a beta test it. I was willing to take all the risk and willing to not make as much money. And he said, remote sales do not work. Remote sales do not work. Yeah. And I was like, that is astounding to me, because we live in generation resign. And you've heard of that phrase
before? The Great Resignation.
The Great Resignation. If the structure isn't going to move with the times, then you're going to resign and go create a new structure.
And I remember, it's funny, you talk about, I was one of the people that you kind of bounced this off of. And I appreciate that about you. It's one thing I very much appreciate about you, Caleb, is that you don't do anything half thought out. Like it's measured twice, cut once. You measured like 40 times before you even brought the offer. And the one thing that I love, I hate the fact that you were given that sobering reality that many times when we're working somewhere and we put in like heart stuff.
Yep.
We put in part of ourselves. And the sad reality is, much of the time in these corporate structures or when you work for somebody, they're paying a position, not a person.
Yep.
And the person, and let's expand on that to personal, the personal that people put into it, we think it counts for something, but when the chips hit the table, we realize, I had a similar realization. I had a similar realization for the company I worked for. I was there 23 years. Now, thank goodness, 10 years in, and it's funny, it's 10 years. Literally 10 years in, I started building my business on the side, the business I'm in now, the one that keeps the lights on. I started building that on the side of my corporate job. And when I left my corporate job, I had that same sobering kind of smack in the face. It's like, okay, yeah, I had really given a lot of myself to this position, and realizing that it was to them just a position. I leave the company after 23 years. They just replaced the position.
Yep.
And probably a little bit satisfied with themselves, because they replaced the position with somebody making far less than I was making there.
That's right.
And it was really, there was no heart in it. When you did that, though, because you didn't have to do that, did it give you the satisfaction at least to say, you know what, I tried everything?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say that one of the things about me over my life, a prophecy actually was spoken by one of my mentors. He's passed on many years ago. We've talked about a few of my mentors, and one of the things that he saw over me, over my family, but specifically over me in this case, was, it'll never be said of you. And he said this to me probably 16, 17, 18 years ago, quite a while now, is, it will never be said of you that you didn't try, that you didn't give it your all, even if it was a situation that wasn't fruitful, even if it was an environment that you weren't supposed to be in, but you really tried to make it work. Yeah. I wanted to do that because I want to be able to stand, to look at myself in the mirror, and to say this to our audience as well. Don't go against your conscience. Yeah. Because to go against your conscience is neither right nor safe. And for me, I couldn't stand with my conscience if I moved on having not tried that. Or on the flip side, staying there and not having the courage to actually come up with that proposal and actually making that shift. So I had to do it for my conscience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I know of people in situations, and in fact, I've been in the situation myself too, where you can just get by. Yeah. You don't have to kind of give everything, and the reward is going to be the same. There's a lot of people who are like, again, that employee mentality too, where people are working in the same place, and you've got somebody who's busting their butt and somebody in the exact same position that's coasting. Yeah. Both make the same wage. Yeah. And sometimes people point to, perhaps that might be unfair, but I think that there is a larger picture. The person who is giving it their all and at least is putting into it, many times I've found that there's a non-specific satisfaction that comes. It's hard to explain. It's kind of something out of the air, right? Yeah. But where you're putting it all in, And that allows you, when you're not there, to enjoy life outside of that, because you've kind of left everything on the table at that point.
That's right.
And you certainly did that when you left your corporate job. Now, that being said, how was the uncertainty? You took a step in faith, and you're very much a faith-based person. That's one of the things I love about you. The other thing I love is while you are very well read, very well taught, you mentioned the ancient scriptures earlier. You are very well versed in these things, but you're also non-judgmental. You don't judge anybody, and I very much appreciate that about you. And I mean, you've got a lot of wisdom to you. You've got so many people, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's people in your life that come to you, they want to bounce things off of you because you kind of do have this spirit. But that being said, living a life of faith, having that faith, yes, it helps. But when you quit your job of 10 years and you're going to start at square one, and you're not entirely specific about how those things go, did worry set in? Have you been worried about this at all? Because you strike me as a guy that doesn't get worried very often.
Well, if I could say that, then I think it wouldn't be authentic for me to say I'm 100% not worried. Hakuna Matata, Timon and Pumbaa. It's no worries for the rest of our days. You love Lion King too, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
I love Lion King.
Yeah.
Reverse that song over and over in my head. But no, there have been moments of worries, and I think I would say if someone doesn't have those moments of worries of or even questioning or having those human thoughts, because we are human, we're going through this journey and this process, this earth, this avatar. If we don't have worries, we don't have these questions that come up in our minds, then I would say we're not being real with ourselves. If everything's cozy or comfortable, then I would say there's a problem. And that's why I had to move on, was because if I stayed in that career, making that money, living in the house, being in a city in the world where most people would love to be able to live 4 seasons, I was like, that's comfortable, but that wouldn't fulfill my DNA of design.
Right.
That C-link, that link between my DNA of design. And for me, starting off, those worries did come. They were natural, but pushing through them and saying, you know what, it's just one foot in front of the other. And I think sometimes in our culture, we can make a mountain out of an anthill, so to speak.
Yeah.
We can,
perspective is very important.
And I sometimes do that with things that I'm not the strongest at, and you know this because you're my friend. Yeah. But I think our audience as well. It's like we can convince ourselves out of stepping out in faith by accessing the third part of our triune makeup that I believe that most people in the West do not. Mike, are you familiar, and our audience, I'm going to ask this question as well, familiar with the phrase trichotomous versus dichotomous?
Okay, let's say that I'm not, because you and I have talked about this, but let's say that I'm not. I wasn't when you originally introduced it to me.
Yeah.
And
say you're not.
Yeah.
Let's say that most of our viewers are not familiar with, because I think probably 99% of people I've talked to with that question say that I have never heard of that.
So where does that come from?
Trichotomous versus dichotomous. So it comes from the Eastern perspective versus the Western perspective. And I'm not saying the East is completely perfect, but the farther east you go, because I've been traveling a lot of places, and the more people in the Eastern cultures like the Middle East and Africa and Asia that you talk to, the more that they gear towards a spirit, soul, and body mindset, where they focus on all three. I've been to the Holy Land, to Israel, to Palestine, where I've sat with Muslims, with Jews, with Christians, and the majority of their conversation around the dinner table is not just about what's happening in politics or world events in the neighborhood, but it's about, what did you dream last night? Like, what did you see in your dreams? Or what their version of God speaking to you? What's the spirit telling you? What's the message for right now?
Or even simply, like for a Western, what's your gut telling you?
Or what's your gut telling you? What's your conscience telling you?
Yeah.
And as in the West, we live in a culture where more or less focuses on gain understanding, gain knowledge, gain like in your soul, and fill your mind with things, or your body, look after your temple. And those things aren't bad or not evil. But and this is my personal core belief, it's like 3 legs of a stool for sitting on. If they're all spirit, soul, and body, each three pegs, if you knock one of the pegs down, what happens? It just topples the stool.
Don't work.
Stool don't work. And in our world, but especially the West, we tend to focus more on the mind, will, and emotions, the soul, the link between that and the body, versus the spiritual is more or less just something that once in a while we'll look into, but it's like the dusty book on the shelf that we don't look at. Whereas you go farther east, they treasure all those 3 things through.
So it's like a book smart versus a heart smart.
Yeah.
And for us, the heart smart perhaps hasn't been given priority in the mainstream culture.
It's right. Like
Okay.
I'm Métis, I'm Native American, and for the Métis, for the Native culture, the Great Spirit is something as an entity as real as talking as you and I are talking right now.
Right.
And that's the way that they treat the spiritual. It's not like it's just for crazy people who are like psychics or new age,
Yeah,
or
it's
like
not woo-woo.
it's not woo woo. It's like it's actually a practical translation, a sea link between the spiritual and the physical. And that's the way that the Native culture has operated. And I believe it's one of the things that in our world is something that we've lost a little bit of.
Yeah, well, okay, lost a little bit of, and I mean, it certainly isn't a focal point. And don't get me wrong, I understand. Like, I came from a time growing up here in Canada, in the very city we're broadcasting in. I'm born and raised here in Kelowna. Lucky to be born here, and present about that luck. I know that it's a blessing. My first 4 years in school, there was school prayer. And then school prayer was taken out, and it was the Lord's Prayer. Now, I'm not advocating that school prayer needs to be thrown back into education, but I think sometimes the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
And even in courses in high school where we studied other religions, there was certainly never a priority that was ever given to the idea of exploring the spiritual side, whatever that might be for people. It wasn't even it's keep spiritual stuff out of schools was kind of what we're given. And then after that, after school, it's like, okay, you either go to a secondary education where, again, it's not there as well unless you go to a theological place. But even if you go to a theological place, many times it's the book smart stuff that they're looking for to progress.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, now you got to make your way. It's 21 Pilots. Got to go out, got to make the money, right? And we're not. I can't think of a time in life where we are encouraged by the culture, the society itself, to explore these things. And what you're talking about is a broader perspective of other countries where that is very much a part of living in those lands. And what do you think the detriment is? And I mean, I think a lot of us who are listening to this might know what it is. A lot of us have itches that we can't scratch, and we don't even know why. They're internal, right? What do you think the detriment is to the stool don't work?
I would say that our generation is distracted.
Okay.
There's a distraction, and we're talking on technology right now. So
sure.
I'm not technology is great as a tool. Sure. I was raised as a homeschooler that technology is your tool, but you're not meant to be its tool. As soon as technology controls you and I, and we're its slave to its devices, no pun intended, then we really we're on a dopamine hit rush where we're constantly reaching for that technology, reaching for that TikTok, reaching for that YouTube clip, reaching for that, even that, like podcasts in general. If we just listen to podcasts all day and don't walk in the actual real world, then we're not really going to do any earthly good.
Yeah.
I believe it's distraction. And I liken this to the armor principle. I think we've spoken about this as well.
We have,
too.
Yep.
So for our audience that may not be familiar, the armor principle, it comes from an ancient story that many are probably familiar with, whether you read the Bible or religious or not, or whatever your spirituality is. By the way, I'm not religious either, but
that's true. You're not religious.
That's a whole different conversation as well, too.
Faith and religion are two very different things.
Faith and religion are two different entities.
Yeah.
Islam, Christianity, and Judaism is totally different than what actual walking by faith with the Spirit is. That's completely different. Religion is different versus the spiritual aspect. But the story comes from the ancient texts in the Bible, David and Goliath.
Yep.
And most people know the story. David comes and says, I'm going to fight that giant. Nobody else is going to fight the giant. There's even the show on Amazon Prime, do a little bit of a plug for it, House of David. If none of you have seen it, you got to see it. It's
good. I haven't watched it yet. Is it really awesome?
It's really, really good.
Yeah,
We're about to do season 2 this fall. But
in
season 1, near the end of the finale, David comes marching into Saul's tent, and he's like, why is nobody fighting Goliath? He's been standing there for 40 days and 40 nights, taunting the armies of God. Like, nobody's standing to defy this guy who's just taunting you. And so David's the shepherd boy who just comes from a humble background saying, I'll fight the giant. And Saul looks at him. He's like, but you're just a boy. Like, you can't fight him. And then he's like, your servant has defended the flock for many years, from bear, from lion. And then finally he convinces them that I'm the guy for the job, that I'm going to be able to take this Philistine down and be able to lead the armies of God to victory. And says, all right, you're the man. But he says, here's the part of the story that most people don't know. The king's like, I have one requirement for you. requirement. You got to put on my armor. You got to wear the king's armor to battle in order for you to be successful. Now, I want to say to our audience, where have you heard this before? Mr., Mrs., in order for you to be able to start up that business, in order for you to be able to be that successful entrepreneur, in order for you to be able to make it online as a digital nomad, whatever the case, wherever you may be, you got to be like Grant Cardone. You got to be like Tony Robbins. You got to be like Kim Kardashian. You got to be like Taylor Swift. You got to be fully them. You got to put on the armor. You got to conform. It's like, no, like you have a design. We can learn from each other. No more or less. I learn from you, Mike. You learn from me. We learn from each other. But if we completely become like that person and we put on the armor, it is my strong conviction that we miss the mark and the purpose to which we are created, that DNA of design, that C link. And when we put on somebody's armor, we can't do. In fact, David said to Saul, he said, I can't wear this. And there he's like, why not? He's like, because I wasn't made for this. I wasn't made for this. And he took his staff, took his stones, and we know the rest of the story. Took down the giant. But if he did it in the king's armor, he wouldn't have been able to do it. The
dexterity to move that sling would have encumbered him from being who he was supposed to be.
That's right.
And what is the armor that we are wearing? Is it armor that's been forced on us? Is it armor that we have decided to put on for whatever reason over time? And really, at the end of the day, too, this is where the part that I, when I'm not at my optimal space, it's usually because you talk about distraction. Yes, it's devices and things like that, but it's also just life. Life is so chaotic for so many people, and they got their head down and they're barreling forward in one direction just to make it to the next day for their family, and not given the incentive for introspection. But it's the introspection to even say, like, to ask the question, am I wearing the right armor? Or am I wearing, even more importantly, am I wearing somebody else's armor? And what does my armor look like? And what would it be like for me to wear my own armor? And take that analogy and then start applying it to some of the real tangible things that are going on in our lives right now. But again, where's the incentive to do that? One of the things I love about some of the podcasts that I love so much is they create this space, especially long form. Like, I love long form. I love that we try and keep our episodes to about an hour, but my sweet spot is like 2 to 3 hours. Like, I love delving into things. Because if you are listening to something like that, many times you are breaking yourself from the norm. I think that's why podcasts are such a potent, a potent form of entertainment or insight now, compared to television, compared to some of these other mediums that are out there. But the introspection, how many times at the end of the day are we just so tired that we just got to say, okay, and we get ready to go to sleep for the next day, and we don't have any introspection whatsoever? And I believe we all need it.
We do.
We all need to have those introspective moments where we actually start questioning who we are, what we do, what we're doing, what we're looking for. And you've done that. Moving forward a little bit, you talk about the C-Link. Okay, so let's go into that right now, because you have, over this past couple of years, safe to say, as you broke free and you freed up some time, and you definitely freed up some RAM and some brain power, you have started to move, and it started to become clear to you where your direction is taking you. And I want to talk about C-Link. I want to talk about what you see out there, and how C-Link will help. You built you used to do that. What do they call them on Twitter, or X now, whatever you want to call it? The talks that you would do.
Like
that's it. Kind of started there, right?
Sure.
You started
Spaces.
doing these talks.
Spaces.
You went and did, and you had a bunch of significant experiences, and other people listening to you or interacting with you had significant experiences. Let's talk about that, and then we'll move over to what it's kind of the culmination. Let's move over to C-Link.
Sure. Yeah. C-Link, really, Spaces on X was part of one of the segments of the pie of the journey. And also there is a show in Bothell, Washington, on a radio called Transformation Talk Radio. And the show is called The Truth is Funny with Colette. And even before Spaces obviously was helpful, but even pre-Spaces years, and when we talked on that first podcast, that was right during the time that I was co-hosting a show with this wonderful woman called Colette. I think she's still local to Kelowna. And we met at a convention, at a New Age convention, where I was one of the keynote speakers talking about understanding mysteries of the night season, which is one of the pillars of the C-Link, and how to interpret your dreams and visions. And we met just by divine happenstance where we crossed paths. And by the way, I believe that everything happens for a purpose. I think you are as well too. I know you are. That there are no coincidences. No coincidences. Everything happens for a reason. There are no accidents, as Oogway said to Kung Fu Panda, right? There are no accidents.
I told you he was versed in the philosophy, folks.
Putting that out there.
The Kung Fu Panda, yes.
Yeah. There. You know this hold. There are no accidents.
Yeah.
And crossing paths with Colette, there was no accidents. And what was funny was that the last day of the 2-day fair, I was there with my team. By the way, my mother is part of my team. She raised me in understanding mysteries of the night season. So it's also good when you're doing dream interpretation, another whole segue as well, but to have teams of guys and girls, because most of the people that sit and have their dreams interpreted are women. It's like, I want to have somebody who's there that is a woman on the team. So there's a safety mechanism and opening that up. But long story short, Colette, she had her own booth set up there as well too. And she saw me and my mother, Catherine, sitting there doing dream interpretation for all different people of different spiritualities. And people would come, they'd walk away, many of them crying, just like impacted with the profound gold nuggets, the C-Link that is in these dreams, because a third of our lives are spent dreaming, by the way, scientifically.
Yeah.
A third of our lives.
Isn't that interesting looking at it that way? A third of our lives are spent dreaming.
Yeah.
And yet how much of our lives do we give focus to that? That's a yes.
Yeah, so that's another tangent. You know, like we could be here for 10 hours. But really, we talked about that, doing dream interpretation. We interpret people's dreams. They walk away impacted. And so Colette was just watching there, and she had her own table with her tarot cards and her readings and things like that, like different things. And she'd watch me like, those people are different, really different, interesting. And she would watch, and finally at the final day of the festival, she came over and mustered up her courage, shared her dream. And then finally she said, I just have to ask. She said, why are you here on Sunday? It was a very interesting question. So what do you mean? It's like, well, sounds like you are people of faith, or just she was mustering up the courage to ask us about her faith, followers of Jesus. And so why are you at church on Sunday? This is church. Yeah. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, this is it. Not in an institution. Yeah. This is it. And she said, wow. And see, that C-Link, that encounter would have been missed if we weren't there on a Sunday in an institutional, conventional system. Yeah. We were there. And so she had an encounter. And so I went back to her table, and so I was like, I just felt like a nudge by the inner gut, as some people call it, but I felt a spiritual nudge by the Spirit of God saying, go over to that table, pick up a card. Now, a lot of religious people would have an issue that, you got to pick up a tarot card.
Yeah.
You're going to get the devil going to jump on you. I picked up a card and picked it up. And she looked at it and she's like, wow. So what is it? And she said, well, when we pick up a card, it's not just for the person. This is her belief, but for myself as well. Okay. What card is it? There's like 52 of them. She said, it's the baby Jesus card.
No kidding.
It was. And I said, what does that mean? She said, well, it means that not only is Jesus birthing something in your life, but Jesus, I think my dragons, because she called her spirit guides her dragons, I think my dragons are telling me that Jesus wants to do something in my life. And this is somebody who's a Wiccan. New Age, completely different belief system than I do. Yeah. And by the way, I treasure and I respect the fact that everyone has different belief systems. You may not share mine. You may not share mine. Just disclaimer.
One of the things I love about you. Yeah.
And she said, but there's something here. Long story short, she has me a guest on her podcast a few months later, and over the next year and a half, we do several shows together. Mm-hmm. She even got sick at one point where she's like, I need someone to take over my show. And so I hosted her show for two or 3 months.
So when that happened, were you like, okay, this is a clue. This is a lily pad in my journey for sure. And I know that I'm being led down this particular path, because I know you love to speak, and I know you're a gifted public speaker, keynote speaker. Yep. We'll talk about that. CalebMatthews.net, everybody, but we'll get to that. But like, When that happened, were you like, oh yeah, thank you, like like this is the direction that I'm starting to move in now, and it's the doors are just flying open,
Yeah.
which is what they seem to have been doing for the most part.
And that's where I knew that I was on the right path. Even at that time, I was still in the corporate world, so I was still juggling my nine to
Oh yeah,
five.
you hadn't quit yet at
I
that
hadn't
point.
quit yet.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's
yeah.
right.
I was still in the
Okay.
corporate world, my 9 to 5, but I was like, okay, there's something special here. Like you'd have that little thought in your mind of,
Yeah.
if I could do this
Hmm.
and do this as my main source
Oh.
of income for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
speaking, motivational speaking, doing conventions, doing seminars, doing workshops, doing keynote sessions in person, doing podcasts. If I could do this as this feeling I have right now,
Mhm.
if I could do this as my main focus and have some other side hustle that pays the bills, but this could be my main focus,
Mhm.
this would be great. But this was while I was doing my 9 to 5. So I was still juggling that.
By the way, I want to throw something in the list that you missed.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really important. It's one of my favorite things about you is how much
Yeah.
you love to help people.
Yeah.
And I mean, you kind of alluded to it in there too, but like just to exclamation point it, to use those things that you're talking about in the hopes of helping people, because that's what your superpower just is, Caleb. Like you are a light, and you love to help people as well, right? And so anyway, I just want to throw that out there too, because that's obviously a huge part of it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But the joy factor.
Yeah.
And here's where I want to get into the DNA of design within the C-Link as well too, because this is what brings Caleb Matthews joy. And there are things that bring Mike Chisholm joy.
Yeah.
There are things that bring our audience joy. And I understand that we have to live in a world where we got to pay the bills and do all that. I'm respecting that. But on the broad MPA, multiple perspective advantage, the MPA, which most people don't look at, is this. I would strongly encourage you to pursue something that doesn't feel like work, but is an outflow of your joy.
Yeah.
Because when you're pursuing that which you were designed for, that you were put on this earth, that you were created for, that which flows from that joy and that design, that DNA of design, that C-Link into what your work is, your work will no longer feel like work.
Yeah. It's an old Chinese proverb. If you can monetize your passion, you will never work a day in your life. I don't know if it's Chinese or not. I was told it was, and I've been repeating it ever since then. So hopefully it is. But yeah, like, and that's true. And many times, again, back to that introspection, what is it that brings you joy? A lot of people can't even answer that question right now. But it doesn't take long to scratch the surface a little bit, to dig a little bit deeper and to find what it is. It doesn't take that long to figure that out.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of going and figuring that out. Okay, now how can I take this and make it more a part of my life? Now, how can I take it and how can I make it where I can earn from it?
Yeah.
So yes, you're a living proof of that concept, because you have sought to do that. You have actually, put money on the table, as they say, and you're moving in that direction.
Yeah.
Spaces. So after you quit, then that's when Spaces showed up.
Spaces, some more podcasts, and then doing more of the more of the online stuff. That was kind of the crossover when the pandemic was happening as well too. So like actual in-person events weren't really happening so much at that time. And then as I was transitioning out of the corporate world into my move to Mexico, starting off, because we haven't touched on that.
No, and I'm so proud of you for that. I'm so proud you are doing that living in two country thing half the year, and you've transitioned marvelously. I'm proud of you for that, man.
San Jose del Cabo, Mexico, the itinerant oasis. I spent the last 3 years. This is my 3rd year building a digital nomad hotspot.
Digital nomad hotspot
for business professionals, specifically for people who
because when you're not there, you're Airbnb that sucker, right?
Airbnb and through my personal website, and it's specifically, there's a lot of people who rent out their places for Airbnb, but there's nobody. I can say this because I've asked the guy that runs all the properties there on our area and on the whole strip and the whole hotel strip.
And it's in Cabo, or
it's in San Jose,
which is right close to Cabo.
There's nobody with the model that I'm doing that has 1 gig fiber internet, that has all the gadgets and gizmos, that has the 2 Perota work desk stations, the modernized interior, because the actual property of the land, it's from 30, 35 years ago. A lot of the places inside are not modernized. First year and a half that I spent building my business, I wasn't making a dime. I was actually going into deficits to modernize my place. So that was a big step. Not only did I step away from my comfortable commission job, but now I'm pulling into my funds to be able to make my business work, to get the residency, to make the shift leaving and selling the house in Canada, leaving the job, leaving everything that's cozy, having people whisper in my ear that are around me saying, what are you doing?
Oh, that's
It's like, no,
filtering that out too.
I am doing my design.
Yep. Yeah.
My armor.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, when I started building my financial business, while working at my corporate job too, I had a lot of people throwing stones, and a lot of the times people throw stones at you, because when you say, like, it's funny, the place that I worked at had 400 employees, okay, and when many of them heard, don't get me wrong, there were some that supported me and was like, yeah, you go, Mike, you go, make it happen, but there were some who were who were, you hear about the crabs in the bucket, right? That's why one crab starts to get out and the other crabs all band together to pull that crab back in that sucker. And many times it's simply because, and they would never even be able to, it's like a subconscious thing.
Yeah.
By you saying, I want more, or I want different.
Yeah.
It then in some way makes them feel self-conscious that, well, I'm doing the same thing and you're rejecting it. So now you're rejecting me. It's like, it's almost like one of those things, but they don't realize how discouraging that can be. And there are a lot of people who listen to those voices and they stop. Yep. They stop moving. They started feeling this empowerment and encouragement from within, from, it could be spiritual, whatever it is. And then when people start to throw rocks, they let it really affect them. Thank you for bringing that part up, because you did have people who were like, what the heck are you doing, man? Like, you had that.
Yeah. When they try to put on the Saul's armor.
That's all that.
Oh, you're in the prime of your life.
Armor,
you need to have a responsible job. Like, okay, who defines success? Who defines success? Right. Who defines success? And ultimately, I believe what's successful for Caleb and for Mike, for our audience listening, to live a life full of days, and we started near the beginning of the conversation like King David, is when you are walking in the DNA of your design, the way that you're gifted. Because what's cool about this entire planet that we live in, the billions of people, no matter what AI does, no matter what human cloning does, we'll never be able to replicate to the actual cell 100% who we are.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is a glorious, wonderful, mind-boggling thing. Yeah. That we cannot be fully cloned 100%. Yeah. It's like Star Wars. You like Star Wars.
I love the Star Wars.
It's like Attack of the Clones, right? you got the army of clones are like, dun, 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 dun. They're all like in line, in step, in the system, put on the armor, do the thing. This is what it means to be successful. And well, that may be somebody's journey. Yeah. That's not my journey. Right. That's not your journey. And if our audience doesn't get anything out of this from me today, just this thing alone, remember this thing alone, and that is fulfilling the purpose to which you were created, the DNA of your design, following that out.
Let's talk about calebmatthews.com and the platform that you're building. Yeah. So talk about the platform that you're building now. Yeah. Like, obviously you're speaking, you're you got the podcast coming. What's the name of the podcast?
The C-Link is what it's going to be called.
So C-Link is how you're branding kind of everything around the C-Link concept. Talk about that a little bit.
Yep. The C-Link concept is what everything's going to flow from. The upcoming podcast to be my guest collaborations, like with Mike and this wonderful podcast right now, to the podcasts on Matchmaker FM that I have a profile there too. We're all great connections there too. Eventually get over to Podmatch with you. But the keynote sessions, everything's built around the C-Link, and that is my core pillars and my beliefs within that. It's on calebmatthews.net. Yep. .com was already taken. The C-Link, and that is DNA of design, which we talked a bit about, the seeing the link between spirit, soul, and body, the way that you were designed for. Understanding mysteries of the night season, so how the spirit, energy, higher power, God, whatever, speaks in dreams of the night that gives you and equips you with the tools that you need to live in your day-by-day life. It comes from a whole life experience since I was 18 of interpreting dreams of the night season. That's a whole other part of my journey that you've heard of in the first podcast. Yeah. And then as well as my entrepreneurial journey. So leaving the corporate 9 to 5 and jumping into being the digital nomad, the entrepreneurialism, the leadership as well too. And finally, history speaks, because one of my favorite subjects in school was history. Mm-hmm. And we talk about like the school system and the systems of understanding in books and everything. I'll use a quick example here to do a plug-in for History Speaks within the C-Link. And that is one of my latest creations, because I do voiceover, meditation, spoken words, kind of a bit of like slam poetry kind of thing. And I did one which was called From Scars to Stars, about the life of Harriet Tubman, in like a little 7 or 8 minute clip. You've heard of Harriet Tubman before? So Harriet Tubman was one who was a slave who escaped in the Underground Railroad from Maryland to Pennsylvania, all the way to Canada, where we are right now. Canada was the freedom land that they traveled, that they dreamed for that land. Yeah. And what most people don't know about Harriet, they think, oh, she got lucky and she ran from her plantation. Most of the school system will say she ran, she got fortunate, she followed the Underground Railroad, she went north, and eventually she got free. She came back and she freed some other slaves. That's the non-spiritual, non-mystery element of it. You can ask ChatGPT and look into a lot of books, but especially a lot of these ancient books that I grew up with reading, is that actually that's only part of the story. Full story is that she escaped, decided that I'm either going to die or I'm going to live free, but I am going to have one or the other. And so she went by herself in swamps, through alligators, through guard dogs and shotguns pursuing her. And when she would fall asleep, she would have these dreams, these trances, these visionary experiences where God would tell her, go to that house. You can't trust that person. You can go there. That's going to be the person that waits for you with the wagon that's going to get you to Pennsylvania. That's going to be the person in Pennsylvania that gets you up to Canada. Did you know that? Did you actually know that before we spoke?
Narrative. That's not the narrative that is out there.
That's not the narrative that's out there. And she came back. It says that she estimated 13 times that she came back. She was nicknamed the Black Moses by her captors. They actually were looking for a man because they could not believe, because they were racist, but also they were sexist. They couldn't believe that a woman would do this, that she brought over hundreds of slaves to freedom through the Underground Railroad, but through that sea link of understanding mysteries of the night season. That, by the way, that when she started falling into these trances at the beginning in these dreams experiences, like her master actually clubbed her over the head with some metal contraption, and it busted her skull and fractured her skull. And see, the humanist mindset, the mindset of non-spiritual mindset, I'm just going to address this. Some people might be offended, but I don't care. And that is, the humanist mindset said, oh, she had these trances and these visions because of her injury. That's hallucinations. Hallucinations. No, that's a programmed system worldview within the West that says, oh, that's delegitimizing these visions. That's that, right. Oh, God didn't speak to her, the Spirit didn't speak to her, that was just hallucination.
We're just going to
justify it by that was her injury. Well, she used her scars that could have defined her, and she turned them into stars.
Oh, turning your scars to stars. Look at you bringing it around.
So that's part of the sea link, these different messages. So when someone says, oh, sea link, you just talk about dreams. No, not just that. Talk about history, talk about the DNA of design, talk about entrepreneurialism, and inspiring the audience to reach their DNA of design and the purpose to which you're created. That's what gives me fire.
Oh, Caleb, I appreciate you so much. And I mean, as people can hear and tell, we can go and go and go and go. Before you go back, you're here for another couple months?
I'm here for another couple months.
Okay. Well, regardless of it, maybe when you're down there again, heCast is really starting to get rolling again. He changed his getting rolling again. You were a friend of this thing back when this thing was in its infancy, was when you and I met, and immediately, we had that magnetic connection, and you've been so encouraging about what it is that we're doing, and you are to everybody, because it's very clear that you just want to be a guy that helps bridge people to finding what their purpose actually is. And I appreciate that very much about you. You've always thought that about He Changed It as well. And I just thank you so much for taking time to do this. And thank you for taking that. Thank you for quitting the job. And thank you. CalebMatthews.net.
Yep.
That's where to go.
That's where to go.
Booking information too. If people want to book you for engagements and things like that, that's where to go as well.
CalebMatthews.net. There's my Calendly's on there. The clink@gmail.com. That's my personal email address as well too. That's where you can find all the information about the C-Link, my upcoming podcast. It's still in the works.
Yep.
But right now, I'm doing as many guest collaborations as possible just to build that rapport and that trust. Because I'm of the firm belief that you got to build trust with your audience before they really want to invest in listening into what you're doing.
Yeah, well, and you're doing that along the way. And the people that you're collecting along the way it's wonderful to see. I love you. You're my friend, and I love watching you grow. And I'm so happy for you that you aren't feeling trapped, that you aren't wearing somebody else's armor, that you are, and you always were anyway. But this extra step that you've taken, I'm really, really excited for you, dude. Thank you so much for taking time to come on heCast and share this with us. It's been such a good time, and I love you, man.
Thank you, man. And just in closing thoughts, if I can,
Yeah.
just I appreciate you having me on. Really appreciate. Thank you, Mike, for having me on heCast. Such an honor.
Yeah.
And to our audience, you may be thinking, okay, how do I get started? How do I get the ball rolling? I'm in the corporate world, or maybe I'm out of the corporate world and I'm frozen in fear of where to turn to next. And you think, I don't know what my purpose is on the earth. I don't know my DNA design. I don't have that C-link. I would encourage you to find something that brings you joy, that you can gather others around and give to and sow into. I believe in the principle of sowing and reaping, the law of the harvest. Find areas where you have something where you're gifted in, where you can give to the community, where you can give to an individual, where you can give. Because when you give something to somebody that you really want that for yourself, it is impossible to outgive the universe.
Oh.
It is impossible to outgive God. It's impossible to outgive the law. The universal law of sowing and reaping is a law. It's no matter what you believe, no matter what your spirituality is, no matter what your culture is, the law of sowing and reaping is universal and in effect. It can't be taken back.
Test it out.
Test it out.
Test it out.
Test it out.
Yeah.
Put your feet in the water, get wet, but do that and start off with that. And don't feel like you have to do something big that somebody else says is successful. Yeah. Be you, be your design. But thank you, Mike, for having me on the show.
I love you, brother.
I love you too.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to say anything else there. Go to heChangedIt.com, go to calebmatthews.net. It's a wonderful episode, another episode. I knew, of course, it would be. It's a lay down when you and I sit down and talk. This has been another episode of heCast, the official podcast of He Changed It. My name is Mike Chisholm. Go change something.